Welcome to part 5 of our live training session here with our RB25 swap 240SX. In the last video, we completed our full throttle tuning. We made pretty good power for a stock engine on pump gas. Now we're going to be taking a look at doing a cold start on day 2 of our live training session, making sure that we have the proper cranking fuel and the proper amount of after start and fuel enrichment as the engine is warming up. Now, once we've confirmed that, we're going to be going in and also tackling our wall wetting or acceleration enrichment type of table tuning, as well as taking a look at setting up a launch control with anti-lag. There's a lot of things to cover here in this training tutorial. Let's jump in so we can check all this out. Welcome back to our live training session here with our RB25 swapped 240SX. Now, we're going to be taking a look at the cold start on this particular vehicle. I've let the vehicle sit overnight, taken it off the chassis dyno, parked it here in a different location in the shop, and we're now going to be trying to fire it off and seeing how the engine is going to run. We're going to be taking a look here specifically at our cranking enrichment table, so the cranking lambda table, cranking VE table, how those are going to be interfacing. If we need more or less fuel, we can determine how the engine starts. We'll talk about that here in just a second. We're also going to be looking at our fuel trim coolant table. This is going to be where we have our after start and our warm up enrichment combined into one table. We're going to look if we need to adjust this or not. Now we know at this point we have successfully gotten the engine to fire off and run on a hot start. So we went through that, in fact, essentially 140 degrees and warmer here in our fuel trim coolant table. We know that that area is going to be dialed in. We needed a little bit more fuel on those hot starts. It was running a bit lean, so that fixed that problem that we were having. Now we know also on a warm engine, it does crank and fire right off. We don't have to have extended cranking, meaning we don't have enough fuel being added. We know that everything is good there. So we're going to be verifying cold start. So if we have enough fuel when we have fire off the engine and have it running, and we're going to verify after start and warm up enrichment. Now we're going to be taking a look at when we log it here, as we start to look at and work with this cold start, we're going to be watching what's going on with our lambda and the lambda feedback. We can actually use that to guide us and making our update changes into our fuel trim coolant table. Now, it's always important to remember that the main VE table is going to be the source of where the main injector pulse width is calculated from. So the combination between our main VE table here, let's just jump into this real quick, the main VE and the target lambda. Everything we're doing here is applying itself on top of these tables. So we've sorted these out on a warm engine. We know it's 100%, and now we are able to go in here into our start and focus on just the fuel trim coolant to add more fuel after the engine's fired off and running and it's warming up. And then the cranking lambda, whether it's the crank VE or the actual cranking lambda target table here, those are going to be what we use specifically under starting conditions. So what we'll do here, and we're going to simply fire it off. We'll log it, and I'm going to let it run. As long as it holds its own idle, which it should, as long as it holds its own idle, I'm going to let it come up to about 160 degrees. We'll stop the data log, then we'll play it back and dissect it and just go through what we need to look for when we're doing our calibration process, and so you can repeat it on your vehicle. One thing I do want to mention is that this vehicle does not have an idle control motor. So we have purely mechanical idle. The throttle plate is open more than we need when the engine is warm. So when the engine is cold like this, we're going to find that it's probably going to, we should see that the idle is probably going to drop down a little bit because we are going to lose some of the torque from the wall wetting effect that we have going on. So on a cold engine, we have a wall wetting effect where the fuel is going to stick to the intake track, into the intake valve. It's not going to get into the engine as efficiently. As a result of this wall wetting, of this poor atomization that we have going on a cold engine, we're going to lose engine torque. What we need to do is offset that either with more air or more spark. In this case, we don't have an idle control motor to have more airflow being bypassed through an idle control solenoid in our idle area right here. Normally what we would have, based on engine speed and based on the target we're after here with the coolant temp, we would go and command a higher target idle speed, something like 13, 14, 1500 at a cold temperature, and then we would have a higher duty cycle or higher output to the idle solenoid that we're working with, which would allow more airflow into the engine, which would give us an offset in the torque. We gain some of that lost torque back. In this case, we don't have that. So when we fire it off, the engine may run a little bit lower in RPM. We know when the engine is running, we're shooting for roughly 1,000 here. I don't know exactly where it's going to idle at. Might be 800, might be 850, and that's purely because the atomization is poor and we have lost some of the torque. Now, what we've done to counteract this, let's just cover that real quick. If we jump into spark tuning here, we are going to find that if my ignition trim coolant temp map We've done this in the one of the videos previous to this. We've set up spark timing adder in an advance. We can see this is based on this particular table, map pressure versus coolant temp. So right here, -4 degrees up to approximately 68 degrees. In vacuum, so 0 psi down into vacuum, we're going to add 8 degrees of timing. So at idle here, if we're commanding 2 when the engine is warm, 2 plus 8 would be 10 degrees. So in this situation, we would have then 10 degrees at idle, which should gain back, again, some lost torque and allow the engine to idle a little higher. But as we start to allow the engine to warm up, notice here that it's going to be taking away that spark timing in about 130 degrees. That's where we're going to go and zero out any spark timing offset here in vacuum, and it'll ride purely on what's in the table here. So this is going to be, the way I have this table here set up, this is going to be a way that we're trying to offset the lack of dealing with an idle control motor and allowing the engine to fire off. You can use the spark advance if you do have an idle control motor. That's going to be fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But in this case, it's going to be an essential part of getting the engine to do exactly what we'd like. Now, one more thing I want to talk about. Let's jump back in here to start. And let's go in here into our start menu. We can take a look down here. Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here. And you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.